I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because my heart kept replaying her face, her eyes, the way her tears fell, like they had been waiting for years to finally fall. I kept hearing her voice. Can I talk to him too? And every time I remembered it, my chest tightened so much I had to sit up. I turned on the lamp, the same lamp, the same soft yellow light that had watched me fall apart for 20 years. I looked at his photograph, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was talking to only him. I felt like I was talking to the whole past. I whispered, "You should have told me." My voice was calm, but my eyes weren't. My eyes were burning. I blinked hard. I didn't want to cry. Not again. Not tonight. But grief doesn't ask permission. It simply arrives. I wiped my cheeks with the edge of my sleeve and whispered, "You were mine, and you were hers too." The room stayed quiet. The walls didn't answer. The photograph didn't move. But inside me, something shifted again. Because now, I had a promise. I promised her I would come back. I promised her I would bring the letters. And I promised her I would not disappear like he did. In the morning, my knees hurt more than usual. Maybe because I had spent the whole night sitting upright. Or maybe because guilt weighs more than age. I stood slowly. I walked into the kitchen, and I made tea. 2 cups, out of habit. Then I stopped, and stared at the second cup. My hand trembled. I placed it back in the cupboard. 1 cup, just one. And yet, for the first time, I didn't feel as lonely as I used to, because somewhere across the city, another person was thinking about him too, and for some strange reason, that made my loneliness feel shared, and shared loneliness hurts less. Margaret called me around noon. Her voice was quiet, like she was afraid of waking up something painful. "Are you okay?" I hesitated. Then I said softly, "No." And she didn't pretend. She didn't say be strong. She didn't say it will be fine. She just whispered, "I know." That made me cry, because sometimes the kindest thing someone can say is, "I know." I sat at my small table. I opened the tin box again, the one that had been hiding in the drawer all these years. I touched the letters gently, like they were alive, like they could bite, like they could bleed. There were more than I remembered. Some were addressed to me, and some had no name, just a date, just handwriting, his handwriting. And my hands started shaking, because I realized something that made my throat close. He didn't just write once. He wrote again, and again, and again. That means he carried this for years. He carried it while eating dinner with me, while laughing with me, while holding my hand, while sleeping beside me. He carried another life inside him, and I never saw it. Not once. I pressed the letters against my chest, and I cried. Not loud, not dramatic, just small, broken crying. The kind of crying old women do when they don't want the neighbors to hear. I whispered, "How could you? How could you live in two worlds and let me believe I was the only one?" I packed the letters carefully. I wrapped them in a scarf, like wrapping something fragile, something sacred. I placed them inside my bag. Then I took the ring, his ring, the ring I had promised to bring. I held it in my palm for a long time. The metal was cold, but it still felt like him. I slid it onto my finger, just for a moment, and the memory hit me so hard. I had to sit down, because suddenly I wasn't in my kitchen anymore. I was 16 again, standing in front of him, hands shaking, heart louder than breath, and he was looking at me and saying, that realization hurt more than anything else, because it meant she grew up alone, not just physically, emotionally too. I sat down slowly. My knees protested. The grandmother brought tea. 1 cup for me, 1 cup for her, 1 cup for the girl. The girl didn't touch hers. She just stared at my bag, like she could feel what was inside. She whispered, "You brought them." My hands trembled as I pulled out the scarf. I nodded. Yes. Her breathing changed. It became faster. She leaned forward slightly, like a child leaning toward a gift. But this wasn't a gift. It was a wound wrapped in paper. I unwrapped the scarf slowly. The letters were there, stacked, old, yellowing at the edges. Her eyes filled again. She whispered, "He wrote." I nodded. He wrote. And then I added quietly, "He wrote a lot." She covered her mouth, and she cried. This time, she didn't hide it. She cried openly. Her shoulders shook, and I didn't know what to do. So I did the only thing I knew. I cried too, because grief is contagious, and so is love. The grandmother sat beside her. She placed a hand on her back. The girl whispered through tears. I waited for something. I waited for anything. My throat tightened. I whispered, "I know." Because I did know. I had waited too, just in a different way. The girl reached for the letters, but her fingers stopped in midair. She pulled back, like she was afraid, like touching them would make everything real. She whispered, "What if he didn't love me?" That question was so small, and yet it crushed the entire room. I felt my heart split. I whispered softly, "Oh, sweetheart." He did. She shook her head quickly. "You don't know that." My eyes filled, and I said the truth. "I don't." My voice broke. "I don't know what he felt, but I know what kind of man he was. And I know he wasn't strong enough, but he wasn't heartless." The girl stared at me. her eyes red, her voice shaking. Then why did he leave me? I couldn't answer, because there is no answer that makes abandonment okay. So I did the only honest thing. I whispered, "I don't know," and my tears fell, because that was the truth. The room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like someone died again. Then, the girl picked up the top letter. Her fingers shook. She stared at the envelope, and she whispered, "It's not even addressed to me." I looked. She was right. It was addressed to me. My name, my handwriting, my life. She held it like it was poison. Then she said softly, "Read it." My throat tightened. "You want me to read it?" She nodded. "Yes." Her voice was sharp, not angry, desperate, like she needed to know what kind of love I got, what kind of love she didn't. I swallowed hard, and I opened the letter. His handwriting stared back at me like a ghost. I started reading. "My love." My voice cracked on the first words, because I had heard him call me that so many times, and suddenly, it felt unfair. The girl flinched. Her eyes filled, but she didn't stop me. So I continued. "My love, if you ever find these." My hands shook. My throat burned. And then, I read the next line, and the moment I did, I stopped breathing, because it said, "I am not the man you think I am." My eyes widened. The girl leaned forward. The grandmother froze. Margaret's hand covered her mouth, and I felt my whole body go cold, because I realized this letter wasn't just a confession. It was a warning to me, a warning to her, a warning to the world. And I knew the next pages would break everything open. I looked up. My voice was shaking. I whispered, "Are you sure you want to hear this?" The girl nodded, tears streaming now. "Yes," she whispered. "I've been hearing silence my whole life. Read it." And I looked down again, and I kept reading. But before I could finish the next paragraph, the girl suddenly grabbed the letter from my hands. Her breathing was wild. Her hands were shaking, and she whispered, "I can't." Then she looked at me and said the words that made my heart stop. "What if the truth makes me hate him?" For a few seconds, no one moved. The letter was in her hands. Her fingers were gripping it so tightly. The paper started to bend. Her tears fell straight onto the ink. And I watched as my husband's handwriting blurred, like even the words were trying to disappear. She whispered again, "What if the truth makes me hate him?" That question felt like someone pressed a knife into my ribs, because I understood her, and I understood myself. Because hate is sometimes the only thing that feels strong enough to hold your heart together. I swallowed hard, and I whispered, "If you hate him, you will still be closer to him than you've ever been." Her eyes flickered. She looked at me like she didn't understand. So I said softly, "Because silence is the worst kind of death." And the room went quiet again. The grandmother wiped her own eyes. Margaret stared down at her hands. And the girl kept staring at that letter, like it was a doorway, and she was terrified of walking through it. She sat back down slowly. Her shoulders shook. She tried to breathe, but her breath kept breaking. The grandmother reached for her hand, but the girl pulled away, not because she didn't love her grandmother, but because she didn't know how to be touched in moments like this. People who grow up without a father sometimes grow up without comfort too. They learn to cry alone. They learn to swallow pain. They learn to wipe their own tears. And watching her do that made something inside me crack, because suddenly I wasn't looking at a stranger. I was looking at the part of my husband's life he hid, and the part of his love he failed. I cleared my throat. I didn't want to read anymore. My voice felt too small, too old, too tired. But the girl looked at me and whispered, "Please, read it." And when she said please, it didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a child asking for something she had never asked. It sounded like a child asking for something she had never received. So I nodded. My eyes burned. My throat tightened. And I continued reading. "My love, I have been carrying a weight inside my chest for years. And every time you smile at me, I feel like a thief, because I have stolen your peace." My hands started shaking. I paused. My tears fell onto the paper, and I whispered, "Oh." The girl leaned forward, her eyes wide, like she was trying to drink the words. "I am not the man you think I am. There is a part of me that you have never met, a part that I buried before you ever saw it. And I was selfish enough to believe, if I buried it deep enough, it would never rise again." The girl's lips parted slightly. She whispered, "What does that mean?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I was reading it for the first time too, and every sentence felt like a new bruise. "There is a child." The moment I read those words, the girl's body jerked. Her eyes filled instantly, and she whispered, "That's me." Her voice was so small, so broken, like she was afraid the words would disappear if she said them out loud. I nodded slowly, and I continued reading. "There is a child I helped bring into this world. And then I left her." The girl let out a sound. Not a cry, not a scream, just a sound, like something deep inside her had snapped. The grandmother immediately wrapped her arms around her. And this time, the girl didn't pull away. She collapsed into her grandmother's chest like a baby. And she cried. She cried the way people cry when they are finally allowed to. Her whole body shook. And I couldn't stop myself. I cried too. I cried because I had lived beside this man. I had kissed him. I had slept next to him. And I never knew he had written the words. I left her. Margaret sat beside me. She held my hand tightly and whispered, "Breathe." But I didn't feel like I could, because suddenly, I wasn't just grieving a husband. I was grieving the man I thought he was. The girl lifted her head. Her face was wet. Her eyes were red. And she whispered, "So he knew. He knew I existed. He knew I was out there. And he still didn't come." I wanted to say something. Something comforting. Something soft. But the truth was, I didn't have comfort, because her pain was real. So I said softly, "Yes." And the girl flinched like I slapped her. She whispered, "Then why?" Her voice rose slightly. Not anger, not screaming, just desperation. She looked at me like I had the answer, like I had been the reason. And for a second, I felt shame, heavy shame, because even though I didn't know, I had been the life he chose instead, and she had been the life he abandoned. I whispered, "I didn't know." The girl stared, and then she whispered something that made me freeze. "But you were his wife. You were there. You slept beside him. How could you not know?" My mouth opened, but no words came, because I didn't know how to explain something like that. How do you explain that a person can be close to you and still hide a whole world? How do you explain that love can exist and secrecy can exist too? I swallowed hard and I whispered, "Because he was good at being gentle, and gentle men can still break people." She looked down at the letter again, and she whispered, "Read more." Her voice was stronger now, not healed, but stronger, like pain had turned into determination, like she was done living in mystery. So I continued. I did not leave because I didn't care. I left because I was afraid. I was young. I was weak. And I was ashamed. The girl laughed suddenly, but it wasn't a laugh. It was a bitter sound. She whispered, "Afraid." She looked up at me, her eyes sharp. "Do you know what it feels like to grow up afraid? To be a little girl who watches other fathers pick up their daughters? To be a child who sits at school events and pretends she doesn't care?" Her voice cracked, and she looked away quickly, but the tears came again. She whispered, "I was afraid every day. And he left because he was afraid." Her voice shook, and I couldn't argue, because she was right. I did not leave because I didn't care. I left because I was afraid. I was young. I was weak. And I was ashamed. The girl laughed suddenly, but it wasn't a laugh. It was a bitter sound. She whispered, "Afraid." She looked up at me, her eyes sharp. "Do you know what it feels like to grow up afraid? To be a little girl who watches other fathers pick up their daughters? To be a child who sits at school events and pretends she doesn't care. Her voice cracked, and she looked away quickly, but the tears came again. She whispered, "I was afraid every day, and he left because he was afraid." Her voice shook, and I couldn't argue, because she was right. I read the next lines. I told myself, I will return one day, when I have enough money, when I am stable, when I can be a proper father. But the truth is, every year that passed made it harder. And then I met you. My heart stopped. The girl's eyes widened. The grandmother stiffened. Margaret's hand squeezed mine, and I kept reading. I met you, and you were kind, and you were warm, and you looked at me like I was a good man, and I was desperate to become that man. So I ran toward you, and I ran away from her. My throat burned. My voice broke. I stopped reading, and I covered my mouth, because suddenly I understood. Not to forgive him, not to excuse him, but to understand. He had used me to escape his guilt. He had used my love as a hiding place, and I felt sick. The girl stared at me. Her voice was shaking. So he chose you. Those words were sharp. Not because she wanted to hurt me, but because she had been hurt her whole life. She whispered, "He chose you." I looked at her, my eyes full, and I whispered, "I didn't know he was choosing between us. And if I had, I don't know what I would have done, because my love for him was real too. And that truth felt cruel." The girl stood up suddenly. She paced a little, her hands trembling, her breath uneven, and she whispered, "I hate him." The grandmother whispered, "No, darling." But the girl snapped, "Don't tell me not to." Her voice broke. She cried again. "I've been waiting my whole life to hate him. And now I finally have the right." She collapsed back onto the sofa, and she covered her face, and she cried like a child. I sat there, and I cried silently too, because in that moment, I realized something painful. This wasn't just her story. This wasn't just my story. This was his story, and he had written it with all of us. Then the girl lifted her head. She looked at me through tears, and she whispered, "Did he love you?" That question hurt more than any other, because I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say yes so badly. I wanted to protect my 20 years, my memories, my marriage. But my throat tightened, and the truth came out. I whispered, "I think he tried." The girl stared, and then she whispered, "That's not an answer." I nodded, tears falling. "I know." She looked down at the letter again, her voice softer now, almost empty. She whispered, "Keep reading." So I did, and I read the next line. and my hands went cold, because the next line said, I have one more secret I never told anyone. I stopped reading instantly. The girl leaned forward. What secret? And I stared at the paper, my heart pounding, because I knew whatever came next was going to destroy the last piece of peace I had left. I stared at the words for a long time. I have one more secret. My mouth went dry. My fingers tightened around the letter. And suddenly, I didn't want to read anymore. Not because I was afraid of the truth, but because I was afraid of what the truth would do to her, to me, to all of us. The girl leaned forward again. Her eyes were red, her cheeks were wet, but her voice was firm. Read it. I swallowed, and I whispered, okay, and I kept going. I have one more secret I never told anyone. Not you, not her, not even myself. The girl blinked hard. Her breathing became shallow. The grandmother's hand trembled on her lap. Margaret's grip on my hand tightened, and I read the next line, and my heart dropped. I tried to come back. The girl froze, completely, like someone had poured ice over her whole body. Her lips parted. No sound came out. She just stared at me, like she didn't believe she heard it. I kept reading, my voice shaking. I tried to come back. I stood outside the house. I watched her through the window, and I couldn't go in. The girl's eyes widened. Her voice cracked. You're lying. She didn't mean me. She meant him. She meant the letter. She meant the whole world. I shook my head slowly. I'm reading his words. My throat tightened, and I continued. She was small. She was laughing. She was holding a toy, and I felt like a stranger. I felt like I didn't deserve to step into her life. The girl let out a broken laugh again, but it was full of pain. She whispered, so he watched me, and still left. Her voice rose slightly, not screaming, but trembling, like her pain was boiling. I didn't answer, because she was right, and the letter kept proving it. I walked away, and I told myself, I will come back when I'm ready. But every time I tried, I failed. The girl stood up, her hands shaking. She paced again. Her breath was uneven, and she whispered, He failed. He failed. Her voice broke. She turned to her grandmother, and then to me, and she said something that made my stomach twist. Do you know what it feels like to be the thing someone fails at? The grandmother started crying. Quietly, soft tears. She whispered, Oh darling. But the girl shook her head. No, no. She wiped her face aggressively, like she hated tears, and she whispered, I was not a mistake. I was not a failure. And then, her voice broke again, and she whispered, "But why does it feel like I was?" I couldn't hold it. My tears fell, because in that moment, I wasn't just hearing her pain, I was feeling it, like it was my own, because I had been abandoned too, not as a child, but as a wife. He left me too, just later, and the same silence had swallowed both of us. The girl sat down again, hard, like she didn't have the strength to stand. She whispered, "Keep reading." Her voice sounded exhausted now, not angry, just tired. Tired of carrying a life without answers. So I read again. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I don't deserve to be called father. But I want you to know, I thought about you every day. The girl's eyes squeezed shut. A tear slid down her cheek, and she whispered, "That's the cruelest thing." I looked at her. "What?" She whispered, "If he thought about me, then he knew. And if he knew, then he chose to live without me." She shook her head, her voice breaking. "That's not love. That's torture." I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend him, not because he deserved it, but because my heart still loved him. And loving someone makes you desperate to protect them, even when they don't deserve protection. But I didn't. I stayed quiet, because she deserved the truth. And the truth was, he had hurt her. Then I read the next part, and my voice cracked instantly, because it said, "I left you because I was afraid you would hate me. And now I realize you deserved the chance to hate me." The girl's lips trembled. Her eyes widened. She whispered, "He knew." I nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "He knew I deserved a chance." And she started crying again. This time, it wasn't angry crying. It was the kind of crying that comes when your heart realizes it has been robbed. Robbed of a childhood. Robbed of a father. Robbed of a choice. The grandmother pulled her into her arms again, and the girl let herself be held. She cried into her grandmother's shoulder, and for a moment, the room became softer, not healed, but softer, like grief had finally found a place to sit. Margaret wiped her eyes, and she whispered to me, "Are you okay?" I shook my head. No. My voice was barely a whisper. No, because every word I read was rewriting my whole marriage, every memory, every moment, and I felt like I was losing him again, not through death, but through truth. I continued reading. I have been carrying this, like a stone inside my chest, and I know, one day, you will find out, and when you do, you will think, I never loved anyone. The girl lifted her head slowly, her face wet. her eyes sharp again, and she whispered, "Did he love me?" I stared at her, my throat tight, and I whispered, "I think he did." She shook her head. "No," her voice trembling. "He loved himself. He loved his comfort. He loved his safe life." She wiped her face again and whispered, "If he loved me, he would have come." Her words stabbed, because they were true, and truth is the most painful thing when you can't argue with it. Then I read the next line, and my breath stopped, because it said, "I was going to tell you. I was going to tell you everything." But then I paused. The girl leaned forward. "But then what?" The grandmother's eyes widened. Margaret's hand tightened again, and I felt my stomach twist, because I knew this was the moment where the letter would reveal why he never told me, why he never brought her into our life, why he died with two families inside his chest. I read it, my voice shaking. But then I saw you holding our baby, and I couldn't do it. The room went silent, so silent. I could hear the clock ticking. The girl whispered, "Our baby." My throat tightened. I nodded, and the girl stared at me, like she was seeing me for the first time. Like she wasn't just looking at an old widow, but at the woman who lived the life she was never given. She whispered, "So he had a second chance." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because yes, he did. He had a second chance. And she never got one. The girl stood up again. This time, her body was shaking from head to toe. She whispered, "He replaced me." Her voice cracked. "He replaced me." And then she covered her mouth, and she started sobbing. Hard, real sobbing. The kind that steals your breath. The kind that makes you bend forward. The grandmother held her. Margaret held me, and I sat there, crying like I was breaking in half, because I couldn't deny it, because it felt true. When the girl finally stopped sobbing, she looked at me with a face full of pain, and she whispered, "I want to read the next letter myself." I hesitated. Then I nodded. I slid the stack toward her. Her fingers trembled. She picked up the next envelope, and when she turned it over, her eyes widened, because this envelope had her name on it, her full name, written in his handwriting. The girl whispered, "He wrote to me." And then she looked up at me, tears falling again, and asked the question that made my heart stop. "Did you know he was writing to me behind your back?" The moment she asked that, my whole body went cold. Did you know he was writing to me behind your back? I stared at her. My lips parted, but no sound came out, because the answer was simple, and the pain behind it was enormous. I shook my head slowly. No. My voice cracked. I swear to you, I didn't know. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not because she didn't believe me, but because her heart didn't know who to trust anymore. And I understood that, because in that moment, I didn't even know if I could trust my own memories. The girl looked down at the envelope again. Her fingers trembled. She traced his handwriting like it was a scar, and then she whispered, "He knew my name." That sentence was so small, but it broke her all over again, because to her, a father knowing your name was a miracle, something she never got to have. She swallowed hard, and she whispered, "He knew my name, and still didn't come." Her eyes filled. She pressed the letter against her chest, and she started crying quietly again, like she was trying to cry without making noise, like she had learned her whole life that her pain should be silent. The grandmother reached out. She touched the girl's hair gently, and she whispered, "Read it, darling." The girl nodded. She wiped her cheeks. She took a deep breath, and then she opened the envelope. Her hands shook so much. The paper almost tore, but she didn't stop. She unfolded the letter slowly, and she began to read. Her voice was barely a whisper, but every word felt like a stone dropping into the room. "My dear girl." The moment she read those words, her voice cracked. She stopped. Her eyes filled instantly, and she whispered, "He called me. My dear girl." She covered her mouth, and she cried, not because it was beautiful, but because it was too late. Margaret whispered, "Oh, sweetheart." But the girl shook her head. No. She wiped her face hard, and she continued reading, her voice shaking. "My dear girl, I don't know if you will ever read this. I don't know if you will ever forgive me, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know, I have watched you grow from far away." The girl's shoulders started shaking. She stopped reading again. She looked up at the ceiling, like she was trying not to fall apart. Then she whispered, "He watched me. He watched me grow." She looked at me, her eyes wild. "Do you hear that? He watched me." I nodded, tears falling. "Yes, I hear it." She continued reading. "I have seen you laugh. I have seen you cry. I have seen you walking to school with your hair tied back. And every time I wanted to run to you, but my feet would not move." The girl laughed again, that bitter laugh. Her voice cracked. "His feet wouldn't move." She shook her head. "My feet moved. My feet moved every day. I walked to school. I walked home. I walked past fathers holding their daughters' hands. My feet moved, and his didn't. She started crying again, harder, and she whispered, "I hate him. I hate him." And then she whispered something even quieter, "But I still want him." That sentence made me cry like I couldn't control it, because it was the truest thing. You can hate someone and still crave them, especially when they're your parent, especially when you never got to have them. The girl wiped her face. She kept reading. "I have another life now, and I know this will hurt you, but I want you to know it was never because you weren't enough. It was because I wasn't." The girl froze. Her breathing stopped for a moment. Then she whispered, "He had another life." Her voice rose, not screaming, but trembling. "He had another life." She stared at me, and I could see it. She wasn't blaming me anymore. She was realizing he didn't just leave her. He created a whole new world and locked her outside of it. She read the next line, and then she stopped. Her face changed completely, like the words slapped her. Her eyes widened, and she whispered, "What?" The grandmother leaned forward. "What does it say?" The girl swallowed, her lips trembling, and she read it out loud. "I have a son." The room went silent, so silent. It felt like the air disappeared. I blinked. My mouth opened. My heart stopped, because suddenly everything clicked. Everything. The girl stared at the paper, her voice shaking. "He has a son." She looked at me, her eyes filling. You had a son." I couldn't speak, because I did. I did have a son. My son. Our son. The boy he held in his arms. The boy he kissed on the forehead. The boy he taught to ride a bicycle. The boy who grew up and moved away and calls once a week. The girl whispered, "So he gave someone else what he never gave me." And then she collapsed. She didn't faint, but she collapsed like her bones turned to water. The grandmother caught her. Margaret stood up quickly, and I sat there frozen, because the truth was so cruel. I didn't know how to survive it. The girl sat back up slowly, her face wet, her eyes empty. She whispered, "He loved him." I shook my head. "He loved you too." She snapped, No, don't." Her voice broke. "Don't say that. Don't try to soften it." She wiped her cheeks and whispered, "He loved him, and he left me, and now I have to live with that." I started crying again, because I remembered something, a memory, a small one, but now it felt like a knife. I remembered the day my husband came home, holding a small toy, a little doll, a cheap one. He said he found it on the street. He said it reminded him of someone, and I laughed. I laughed. I didn't understand. I didn't ask. I didn't push. And now, I knew that doll was for her. Or maybe it was his guilt, wrapped in plastic. I whispered, "Oh God." Margaret looked at me. "What?" I swallowed, and I said softly, "He brought a doll home once. He said he found it. He said it reminded him of someone." My voice broke. I think it was for her." The girl's eyes widened. Her lips trembled. And she whispered, "So he almost what? Almost came, almost gave it to her, almost walked into her life, almost became her father, and then didn't." Again, she looked down at the letter, her voice quiet now, almost dead. She whispered, "Read the rest." But her hands were shaking too much. So I took the letter gently, and I continued reading, my voice shaking. "My dear girl, I want you to know that my son has a sister, and he doesn't know, and that is my greatest shame." The girl stared at me, her eyes wide, and she whispered, "My brother." I nodded slowly. "Yes." Her lips trembled. She whispered, "He has a sister, and he doesn't know." And then her tears came again, but these tears were different. Not rage, not heartbreak, but something softer, something aching. Because suddenly, she wasn't only grieving a father, she was grieving a brother, a sibling, a family, a connection, a life that she was never allowed to have. She whispered, "Is he like him?" My throat tightened. I didn't know what to say, because my son is kind. He is gentle. He is hardworking. But he is also distant. He is busy. He is his father's son. And I whispered, "He is good." She nodded slowly and whispered, "Does he know about me?" I shook my head. "No." Her face twisted, and she whispered, "So I'm still a secret." I started crying again, because she was right. Even now, even after death, my husband was still hiding her. The girl looked at the final lines of the letter. Her lips trembled, and she whispered, "There's more." I nodded, and I read the last paragraph. "If you ever find your brother, please do not hate him. He is innocent. He is my second chance. And you were my first, and I failed you." The girl stared at the paper, her breathing shaky. Then she whispered, "So he knew. He knew she would find him. He knew she would want her brother. He knew this secret wouldn't stay buried forever. And still, he never fixed it." The girl stood up, her voice shaking, and she said something that made my blood run cold. She whispered, "I want to meet him." I froze. Margaret's eyes widened. The grandmother gasped softly, and the girl looked straight at me, tears falling again, and whispered the words that changed everything. "Take me to my brother."